Hello true crimers, and welcome to Only Murders and the Missing, a podcast presented by UQ Criminal. Join us as we explore the fascinating world of true crime. In each episode we'll take a deep dive into the story, unraveling the mystery and uncovering the cases that still haunt us. Through our podcast, we'll shed light on the victims, honoring their memories, and seeking justice on their behalf. Beyond storytelling, we are advocates for the missing and the murdered, lending our voices to those who can no longer speak for themselves. So, grab your headphones and prepare to join us. This is Only Murders and the Missing. Episode 28. The controversial death of Crystal McCrory Jones. She was found with a gunshot wound to the head. Within 2 hours, police ruled it a suicide. But does the evidence support that ruling? On the morning of February 9, 2023, in the small town of Goodwill, Louisiana, 43-year-old Crystal McCrory Jones woke up not feeling well, and she made an appointment to see the doctor. She never made it to that appointment. That afternoon, sheriff's deputies found her dead in her bedroom, a pillow over her face and a gun in her hand. Just 1 hour and 45 minutes later, the sheriff's department had ruled it a suicide. But that's not where her story ends, because almost nothing about this case adds up. Crystal's family believes the truth was buried with her. And they've spent the last year uncovering the red flags. Crystal's husband, Tony Joe Jones, a former deputy with the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department, wasn't just the last person to see her alive. He was also connected to the same department that ended up investigating her death. Although most people would consider this a clear conflict of interest, he was never seriously treated as a suspect, and the entire investigation was closed before it even started. Tony saw his wife alive early that morning. According to the report, when he didn't hear from her later that day, he asked Deputy Chuck Harris, a former colleague of his, to do a welfare check. When Harris arrived, the house was already unlocked. He went inside, called Tony for directions to the bedroom, and there, around 4:40 p.m., he found Crystal lying lifeless in her bed. Crystal had a single gunshot wound to the head, fired through a pillow that was positioned over her face. Less than 2 hours later, her death had already been ruled a suicide. Police interviewed Tony about the death of his wife. That interview was only 7 minutes long. Crystal's sister Jana said, it took them 7 minutes to interview him, and in that 7-minute interview, they mentioned that it was a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Tony reportedly changed his story about his whereabouts that morning, but that didn't seem to matter to the sheriff's department. No outside agency was brought in to investigate, and the state police never reviewed the case. When Crystal's family begged for help from the Louisiana State Police, they were turned away. 9 days after investigators had thoroughly searched the scene, Tony suddenly discovered the missing shell casing from the fatal shot. Despite the investigation report noting that no bullet casing was found at the scene, Tony claimed it was just sitting there on top of the makeup stand in the bedroom, apparently missed by everyone who had gone through the home looking for evidence. The sheriff's office said the casing was plain as day in the crime scene photos. But when Jana reviewed every image, it wasn't there. Either trained investigators missed it, or it was never there to begin with. Tony tried to collect the life insurance policy for $63,000. Then, against her family's wishes, he authorized her cremation. That single decision erased any chance of a second autopsy, gunshot residue testing, or re-examination of her injuries. Tony refused to allow her ashes to be divided, or to be sent to her son in New York, until a month after her cremation. He didn't even properly package her remains. Jana was never convinced that her sister committed suicide. She searched Crystal's laptop, which she says holds evidence pointing back at Tony. She also began reviewing photos from the scene, and those taken at the funeral home. What she saw disturbed her. Deep bruises on Crystal's hands and inner thighs. A broken fingernail. Possible signs of a struggle. The autopsy report made no mention of these injuries. When Jenna pressed the forensic pathologist about it, she was told the markings were just postmortem lividity, blood settling after death. Bruising happens when the heart is still pumping. Lividity happens after the heart stops. If the injuries on Crystal's body were bruises, then she was still alive when they were inflicted. That doesn't support the suicide theory. And with Crystal cremated at Tony's request, any chance to re-examine these injuries was lost forever. Jenna also noticed that fewer than 40 photos were taken at the crime scene. In some of them, the family dog can be seen lying on the bed beside Crystal's body, a clear indication that the scene had not been secured properly. And there were even more red flags. The ballistics report misidentified the weapon as a Ruger EC9, but the serial number showed it was an LC9. The coroner's report misspelled Crystal's name, and her birth and death dates were incorrect. It also listed medical conditions Crystal never had, including diabetes, pneumonia, and seizures. Even the time of death was suspicious. Although it was first logged as 10:35 a.m., based on Google data, it was later changed to 5:05 p.m., without any explanation. Jenna later told local reporters, "This was the worst case of rushed unprofessional policing I've seen." She immediately took her concerns to the sheriff and the district attorney, but instead of listening, they dismissed her entirely, even going so far as to call her a liar. Jenna is working with private investigator Sheila Wysocki, a well-known name in the world of cold cases. Together, they've taken Crystal's case to Washington, D.C., hoping someone outside Louisiana law enforcement will listen. So far, no one has reopened the case. Approximately a week before her death, Crystal had begun tracking Tony's location through his phone. According to her family, she had grown suspicious, not only of infidelity, but also of what she may have discovered regarding possible inappropriate behavior with underage girls. Crystal had accessed his accounts and was monitoring his movements. Then, on February 8, the night before Crystal's death, Tony deleted several contacts from his phone. These contacts included individuals listed in his phone as a coroner, a chief deputy, an employee at the local bakery barn, a pastor, and several others. On the morning of February 9, 2023, Tony left their shared home at 8:06 a.m., and according to Google location data, his phone pinged at multiple stops throughout the day. His timeline is as follows. 8:54 a.m., Tony arrives at a Bastrop residence to allegedly work on a refrigerator for a man named Darren Billings. 9:59 a.m., he leaves the Bastrop address. 10:53 a.m., he arrives at 305 East Main Street, the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department, labeled as work, in his Google account. 11 a.m., Crystal's estimated time of death per the death certificate signed by Coroner Lewis Carter. 11:09 a.m., Tony leaves the Sheriff's Department. 11:11 a.m., arrives at the bakery barn. 11:53 a.m., leaves the bakery barn. 12:01 p.m., arrives at Forest High School, where Detective Alan Irby later claimed Tony had been, all day, working. However, Tony's business license had been revoked, and he was not legally insured to perform contracted work in public schools. At 1:16 p.m., a FedEx package was delivered to the couple's home, but no one answered the door. 2:43 p.m., Tony checks his daughter out of school, even though she typically rode the bus. 3:03 to 3:10 p.m., after checking his daughter out of school, Tony's movements were suspicious. GPS data shows he idled in an unconfirmed location for 7 minutes. He then took 35 minutes to make a simple 9-minute drive to Sonic Drive-In, suggesting he may have been stalling or deliberately wasting time. 3:25 p.m., arrives at Sonic Drive-In. 3:57 p.m., leaves Sonic. 4:03 p.m., stops at Walmart. 4:11 p.m., leaves Walmart. 4:16 p.m., performs a Google search for East Carroll Medical Clinic, Lake Providence, Louisiana. 4:16 p.m., arrives at an unknown address approximately a mile from Walmart. 4:37 p.m., leaves that location. 4:51 p.m., arrives back at the home he shared with Crystal. When he arrived on the scene, he approached Jana and simply said, "It's a single gunshot wound to the head." Tony told police that the home's Ring doorbell camera hadn't been active for over a month, but email records show someone had logged into the account just 2 weeks prior. Only 4 days after Crystal's death, Tony searched, "What is the appropriate time to date after the death of a spouse?" And just over a month later, he changed his Facebook status to single. He even brought a female friend with him when he went to view Crystal's body at the funeral home. Tony listed his Facebook employment status as patrol officer with the West Carroll Parish Sheriff's Department, even though he didn't work there. Crystal wasn't Tony's first wife. According to his ex-wife, their marriage ended after Tony was found guilty by Child Protective Services of having an inappropriate relationship with a minor. While Crystal had a history of depression and a suicide attempt 11 years before her death, her family says there were no recent signs she was suicidal. She had just passed a major exam to become nationally certified in her insurance career, something she was very proud of. She was also looking forward to becoming a grandmother, as her son Corbin and his wife had a baby on the way. Her family believes she may have confronted Tony about what she found and that she paid for it with her life. Crystal isn't just a case number. She was born on May 17, 1979, in Crossett, Arkansas, to Janie McGilton and Doyle Dwayne McCrory. Crystal was the first daughter in her family. She had 2 brothers, Dwayne and Joshua, and a little sister, Jana. She graduated from Bastrop High School in 1997, and raised 2 sons, Corbin and Mason, whom she adored. She loved being with her family, and her beloved dog, Rocket. Crystal worked in insurance and co-owned a martial arts school. She was known for her silly jokes, clever pranks, heartfelt compliments, and surprise gifts, just because. She found joy in organizing things, whether it was her home, events, or even daily life. It was one of the things that made her happiest. She was a sister, mother, wife, and friend. Crystal's family believes she was murdered. They believe she fought back. The bruising, the fingernail, the pillow over her face, and the missing casing all seem to point to something far more violent than suicide. But in a small town where the investigating agency has close ties to the man at the very center of this case, justice never had a chance. Her husband was never thoroughly questioned. The evidence is inconsistent. The timeline is shaky. Her family needs help fighting to get the case reopened. They want accountability and answers. And maybe with enough eyes on this case, we just might help them get it. Because Crystal mattered, and she still does. To follow updates and support the family's efforts, visit the Justice for Crystal McCrory Jones Facebook page. You can also learn more about Crystal's story and Jana's fight for her sister by reading her book, Justice Denied: A Sister's Fight for Justice, the true story of Crystal McCrory Jones. Thanks for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. To connect with me and read more true crime stories, go to unquestionablycriminal on medium.com, and I'll see you in the next episode.